Yeah, maybe I'll just do a quick intro to who I am. So my name is Tara. I've been with Staffbase for many, many years, and my whole job has always been around content and education for internal communications, which is why I've really just been diving into the topic of AI and what exactly that means for us. Over to you, Melanie.
So I've been interested in AI for a long time. I work at a company that does internal communications, ROI communication, and I oversee our creative and our technology and digital experience group. But I also studied computer science in college way back in the day, way before AI was what it is now and what generative AI means to the comms professional now. So it's been something I've been paying attention to probably all my career, but definitely something that's been a lot more prevalent in the last year as this has become a very hot and trending topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And because it's such a, I guess area where, especially with regard to the concerns, where we're all still trying to figure it out, right? No one has sort of complete answers, but we're all kind of in this together. We actually wanted to have a bit of I'm going to say collaborative session with you today and just get a little bit of a sense of where everyone's at and what everyone's main concerns are. So starting off with that, so the first question that we kind of had is like, if you think about one word that comes up when you think about the impact of AI and comms, what is that one word? Maybe you can just shoot that over in the chat for us.
And I know we're going to share a collage or a word cloud of some of the terms that have been produced in other surveys done with the same question. We also did this in a survey that we did for a group of communication leaders. The main word that came out is different than the one that we have that we're going to show you in a minute. But I think, if anything, it was leaning towards positive and interested, right? Curious, excited. But there were a lot of concerns. And hopefully we can talk about a few of those today.
To the next page. So this is what, right, from the study that you were referring to, this is kind of what we got. I'm actually like full transparency. I don't see the chat right now on my end. So if someone could give me an idea of what kind of words are trickling in.
I see some really interesting ones. I see, mixed emotions, nervous, efficiency, transformative, fast-paced, fascinating, efficiency. We'll have to take all of those and make a word cloud of them maybe after.
Yeah, absolutely. I also see unemployed.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of mixed emotions in that list.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say mine would probably be mixed emotions if I had to answer this question.
It's a challenging area, right? Because we know things are changing so quickly that even though you might be able to learn about something or feel confident in some tool that you've discovered that can help you be more productive, a month or two from now, something else will be introduced, or it'll become more sophisticated, or things will change, and then there's a lot of uncertainty as to where everything is going. So I can imagine, even if you feel okay about it now, the radius of this is ever expanding.
Yeah, that's so true. And like you say, changing. I was listening to something this morning that was talking about AI for drones and how they would be able to just assess everything and everyone in a certain area. And that's like, that's a whole other level. But then if I think about, creating content with it, there's like all these opportunities. So I think what you're saying is so true, that it's going to be a roller coaster, I think, emotionally for everyone over the coming weeks. Melanie, you actually shared this with me the other day, this study by We. Maybe you can just speak to this a little bit in terms of what exactly was found here for comms professionals, specifically around AI.
Definitely. And I think it's a good resource for most communicators to be taking a look at. There was a survey done in April and they released it in May. And it was specifically for communication professionals, trying to understand how people were feeling about it, what adoption looked like. I think the general consensus was that the adoption level was somewhat low and people were using it for content. Mostly, that was the biggest area. And in the survey, they go into some specifics around the types of content that people are generating with AI or the ways that they're utilizing it. But you can see there, it says only 16% of communication professionals feel knowledgeable about it. And that goes back to, I think, the list of adjectives that people came up with, that people are unsure about a lot of things and they're not necessarily aware because there's so many applications that are launching. It's really hard to stay knowledgeable because everything's changing moment by moment. There are a lot of in that survey, and it was in May, right? We're in June now, and there's probably additional information, and there's different things that have already launched since that survey came out. People have responded about how they're using it, but also how it's being regulated a bit, right? What their concerns are around privacy, around confidential information being shared, around inherent bias. There's a lot of that data in there, so it's helpful just to see what other people are concerned about and paying attention to. And I think the long and short of it is we don't have all the answers, and that survey doesn't necessarily share them all, but it does highlight the fact that everybody else is suffering through the same feelings and the same experience, and that everybody's a little concerned about what's gonna happen and how it's gonna affect them.
Yeah, and I mean, some of those concerns I also find they're quite unique to communication within a company, right? Because you have that whole question of, well, can we actually input the data that we have? Can we, if this is confidential information, we can't actually, kind of use this in any kind of external tool. And then there's the alternative to actually, set up your own tool and kind of feed it with information. And we sort of kind of wanted to check in a little bit and see what I'm going to say sort of the overall temperature is here within everyone who's joined us today. Like, how are you actually feeling about the impact of AI in your lives? There should be a poll popping up where you'll be able to choose between excited, worried, both, or neither. How do you feel about it, Melanie?
So I'm excited, but that's because I've spent a lot of time understanding at least the way that it's built, right? There's, I guess, maybe a little bit of both in there, but I don't look at it as worry as much as I look at it as like, how do you get ahead of the things that are concerns? There's always this philosophy though, the technology can be used by bad actors, right? The idea that you're going to get a phishing call now from somebody who's using the audio voice of your mother or your coworker or something, right? Like much more sophisticated way of tricking people, right? But then there's also the other side of it where AI is being used for so many good things in the world, right? The ability to diagnose diseases more quickly, the ability to create productivity tools that help, everyday people, the idea that it might be able to be leveraged in education to create a more level playing field and get access to education and tutoring even for, people who previously wouldn't have been able to access that. So there's a lot of positive things in the world, and I like to think that the glass is half full. And that those positive things could maybe counterbalance the negative things that are popping up as well.
Yeah, just as you were saying that, it just made me think, like, I guess it's kind of like everything else, being a human being, right? It's like we can always do great things and we can always destroy ourselves. We're kind of always at the that intersection between the two, and we just all gotta keep our fingers crossed that we'll be smart and we'll be wise. Which is, I think, especially why it's especially important just to have a lot of dialogue around this at the moment and just understand where we're at and to make sure we make informed decisions. So our answer here for this is actually, so we have 68% saying both, 25% saying excited, 4% are worried, and 4% are neither. And I actually pulled this poll from a survey published like about 3 days ago by The Verge. It was done with, I think, around 2,000 people who took part in this. And I see in our group, we have a lot more both than they had. So we had 68%, right? So which is double. And I think that's also honestly where I find myself. I think majority of the time I'm excited. I come from content and I just see all the opportunities to create just content in a, I wouldn't necessarily only say quicker way, but also actually in a way to be able to shorten things a lot more, because we are super overwhelmed with content overall. And it's a very phase of experimenting. I think if you're within content, it was also interesting, to listen earlier to what we can do with prompting. Like one of the things I did recently is just to kind of throw in some of my own writing and then ask what that style would be called, right? Or what sort of the words are that I would need if I wanted to create prompts that kind of reflect what I was doing in my writing. And it was interesting because I've never analyzed my own writing, and suddenly there was this analysis of this is what you do, these are the mechanisms that you use. And we have sort of one more question as we kind of dive into going into the concerns, and that would be actually knowing from here within the group, what are your biggest concerns around the impact of AI? We'll cover 3 big ones that I think that have also come up, over the conversation earlier. But I'd be quite curious just to hear if those are also the ones that are interesting for everyone here, or if there's other things that we can make sure that we try to address what we can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see a question or two in there. And I know in the last session, there were a lot of questions coming up about privacy and bias and other things. So I know they touched briefly on a few of those things, and hopefully we can answer a few questions today, or at least have a discussion about them, since a lot of them are open-ended. And some basic tips on how to put some stopgaps in place so that you can give the people on your team and the people that you work with every day some context as to how to use these tools initially, and a roadmap for maybe keeping aware of what's coming down the pike, so you don't find the rules that you put in place now completely obsolete and irrelevant, and endangering your company, 2 months from now when a bunch of things change.
I see we have a lot of privacy misinformation coming in. Regulation, bias, regulation, imposters.
One of the things, obviously all of these are top of mind for a lot of the companies out there, and their communications team. They're larger teams that can use these things. A lot of development teams are using them, and using them to help code, which I think is one of the areas. In that study we shared, the 2 areas that they found that ChatGPT and other language models like it will probably be more prevalent are in code, writing code, and in writing content, right? Those are the 2 big places where we're seeing its impact now already. And there's a lot of privacy concerns because there was a survey done by a cybersecurity company that basically found like 11% of employees have copied confidential information into ChatGPT. And that includes, everything from looking at code to looking at just taking a survey or a document a transcription even of a meeting, and then dropping that in to try and get a summarized set of themes, not necessarily thinking through what's in there and then feeding that into the larger system. And it learns from what you input, right? It rebalances its outputs based on every single user's inputs. And so it's learning about your company and about confidential information when that happens.
That's one of those things, like, how do you regulate that, right? Because you won't even know, so that's one of those things where I'm just like, it's a good idea to set up these kind of regulations, but it's up to the individual to make a decision, and you don't see, sort of the interaction that other people have had with the system. So I guess you'll find out sort of on the other end if the information appears somewhere else, but other than that.
Well, yeah, I think there was a bug that happened with OpenAI's ChatGPT, I think back in March or April, where it started to populate chat, like, it stores your chat history, and it populated the chat history with the titles from other users' chats because it's learning and it's not filtering that out. And they were like, oh, that's a bug. We probably shouldn't be sharing other people's chat titles with the users.
Probably not.
It's a big deal. There are companies that are actually banning the use of it. I think that was mentioned in the last session as well. Yeah. They are creating their own proprietary language models. And I think now that the technology exists, people know how it's built, right? They understand the neural networks that it's built on. A lot of companies are trying to adopt their own models so that they can serve up their own models and keep information private. There are also other language models other than ChatGPT. That's the one everyone knows. And that's the one that is most familiar to people. But there are other ones out there that are trying to put more proprietary controls in place, privacy controls, to help be able to not feed certain information into the learning algorithms, but rather just use it as a standalone. Here's the information we can give you from this, but I'm not learning from it. So that's an evolving field and an evolving area that hopefully will alleviate some of the issues around privacy.
Yeah. And we will, I think the second topic that we brought along is also related to the area of guidelines. The first one that we actually brought along for today is the question of, someone wrote earlier, the first word you think about when AI is unemployment, right? Is AI coming for our jobs, or is it actually an opportunity to do something else, to learn about it, to work with it? What do you think about this, Melanie?
So it's a good question. a lot of people I think have talked about this already, even in earlier sessions, but there's a new skill set I think evolving from this whole experience. There's this prompt engineering, if you will. Will that be a skill set that's needed for the long term? I don't know, because these models are also getting more sophisticated, so they may be learning more from from simplified prompts over time. It might be easier to do this, but if you think about it, we are now the developers, right? You don't need a developer to work with an AI language model. Your words, your inputs are the development code. You are the ones, telling it, here, I'm inputting this information, and this is the style I want it in, this is the context. And so the ability to engineer those prompts is really what's a skill set that's going to be desperately needed by most professionals that are using these tools, and specifically in comms, if you're using them for content and that kind of thing. Understanding how to really get it and engineer it to what you need it to be is actually an opportunity, I think, right? The better you get at that, learning that skill and embracing it and really exploring it is going to make you a lot more efficient, and using these tools a lot more rewarding than if you don't have that and then you're constantly getting the wrong answer. So I don't think it's replacing our role, because it still needs input, still needs to understand. It is really good at summarizing and at natural language translations, things like that, at task-based execution. It is not, it doesn't have the context and sensitivity of a larger, human brain that can think about all of the different parameters that might need to come into play when you think about what you need to do to communicate a certain topic or to work through a certain issue. So the thinking is really that it's a layer on top of what your existing skill set is, and that it's going to allow you to stay in the creative and strategic space more because it'll handle the productivity tasks for you.
Yeah, that's so true. I see it like the same way, that it's actually sort of there's someone said this to me the other day. They were saying there's an opportunity that, as a human being, you get to do what's really interesting, and the stuff, that's sort of always regular and the same, you can kind of outsource. We did a prompting webinar yesterday as well, and it was kind of focused on one of the examples was what if you took something like writing the message for the annual survey, right? So maybe that's something that you've done a couple of years in a row, and it's not really something interesting or engaging anymore. And it's these types of things. I know the first thing that I did was I had to terminate my phone contract in Germany or something like that, and I was like, oh my god, let me just put in the 3 bullets, and within 30 seconds I had the email, and I could just send it off. And otherwise it would have taken me a lot of time to kind of compose the stuff. And I think in the professional context it's the same thing. There are certain things you can sort of outsource to the to that support. I really see it as support, especially in a sort of, if content is part of the work that you're doing and writing is part of the work, and also for brainstorming, just the kind of speed at which you're able to come up with ideas. And I think my perspective on it is kind of it's just, we got a different tool. It's not we've got a more powerful tool. Before that, you would still look for that information, but it would just take a lot longer to find it, because you would have to Google and go to a thesaurus and maybe talk to someone and sleep on it. And so I just feel like the speed at which you're able to keep up with just what is demanded by sort of information today, that just it makes it a lot quicker. There was someone here that wrote in the chat, and this is also, I think, a perspective I find quite true, which is AI is coming for the jobs of communicators who don't learn how to use AI, right? So I think there's also really an opportunity here actually to pioneer how to work with this and how to use it for communication within the company, through actually going and learning about it, seeing how to use it, and getting involved in these types of conversations that are so difficult to figure out how do we navigate it, and how do we go forward from here.
That's right. I would say too that as communicators, a lot of people, we focus on the words and the creative and the storytelling, care a little less about the technology piece, but I do think it's incumbent upon every single person in the workforce to actually pay attention and to understand how these models function, what's happening with them. I know it sometimes can be a little it hurts your brain a little bit to spend time understanding what's happening and getting into the technology behind a lot of this. But when policies are being made, and when you need to figure out how this impacts your workforce, what policies you're going to put in place, what you're encouraging people to do with it. A lot of times you'll see IT and maybe the executive team sitting at the table trying to make these decisions without that human perspective that comes from communicators and HR. So it's really important that you have a voice inside of that conversation, and that communicators educate themselves and lean into the whole idea of digital fluency, AI fluency. Like, don't be scared of it, so that you can be good at it in your own job, but also that you can speak intelligently to it when it comes to actually creating these policies. And one of the things that I recommend, our company recommends, is the idea of a cross-functional team to really look at this. A task force, if you will, to be able to analyze from different perspectives the impacts of AI and the things that you as a company or your team needs to be able to consider and keep in mind as everything evolves. I think somebody asked in the chat even about how to craft a policy, or if there are tips, and I think that's the first thing, right? I don't think anybody should do it in a vacuum as their own individual person. I think cross-functional group of people that have perspectives and how it's being used on the technology side, from the human perspective, from the company confidentiality perspective, can really help to coalesce around something that will work for your company and that will make sense and help protect everyone.
With the aspect of time, I think I'll actually move on to our second concern, which is, this whole thing of like misinformation. How do we know what's real, what's fake? Yeah, I think like one of the key sort of points that I've just been hearing in a lot of the conversations I've been in is just like, it comes down to who's saying it, right? And whether you can trust the source, whether you can trust the channel, and making sure that stays, well, that's basically the only thing that you really have, because you can't believe your eyes anymore. Like I think Frank said this in the first session as well. So who can you believe? You have to trust each other, which is, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, particularly in the image space, right? That there's a lot of sophistication around the image models and the things that they can create. I think there was an instance in the US where somebody put out an image of the Pentagon on fire that was generated by AI. It wasn't even a good one. Like, it was very obviously AI, but it made the stock market drop, and people reacted in the moment to that. And it actually impacted real world lives, right? Like, real people's investments were affected by somebody's fake image. And so I think there's an important factor that we all take responsibility for the things that we create, and kind of taking an ethical stand on how we do that, but also have an awareness of what is being created out there, and always be a little skeptical. Trust but verify, right? When it comes to the text-based models and the kinds of content that they generate, I mean, there's been a lot of stories about lawyers citing cases that weren't real. And I think, if anything, it's just telling the story that you shouldn't be utilizing it for fact-based information, right? It's not a fact generator. It's not an encyclopedia that's been verified by 5,000 sources. It's taking inputs that it found in the very vast recesses of the digital interwebs, if you will, and taking all of that information and coalescing it around thoughts and ideas, and then it outputs that. So it makes things up. It uses fake information to inform itself, and that needs to just be an understanding that you have going into using any of these tools, so that you're not taking it at face value, because it's not always going to be accurate, and that might not be the best way to find your information. In fact, something like a search engine result gives you the ability as a human being to evaluate answers and then to decide, okay, this is the one that feels the most accurate. Don't take the one answer that you get from an AI-based chat generator as the end-all be-all source, and really use it for the things that it's good at, which is, crafting different variations of content, or giving you some brainstorming ideas, or the things that kind of the soft skills, the simple things, and not necessarily the research piece.
We had just a comment here talking about like the ability how to fact check images and videos, right, as a part of digital fluency. And it just made me think like what you were saying earlier as well, Melanie, to the point that right now sort of the input is, prompt engineering maybe is a thing now, but we don't really know what's coming next, right? So as we're learning about AI is also learning, right? And it's just kind of growing. So I honestly, I really wonder how we will be able to solve this one, because oh, sorry, I was just looking at the time and seeing that we should probably move on to our
and there's always a hope
here.
that there's a positive in the future. You can go to the next one, but the positive in the future might be that there's AI tools that will counterbalance. The good AI tools will counterbalance the bad ones, right? And maybe there's a way to make sure that there's a digital signature of some sort that's identifying AI generated images. I don't know. I'm hoping that there's a technology out there. If anything, regulation is needed to help solve this, right? Anybody who's running an AI-based language model that other people are utilizing should have regulations in place on what it can and can't do.
And that actually brings us to the third concern, which we've already kind of discussed a little bit here and there. I do believe there should be a poll popping up now as well, just asking you if you think we need them or we don't. And from the conversation so far, I have a pretty clear idea of what the answer to that will be. And just to share with you in the meantime, so this also comes from the survey from The Verge that I was referring to earlier, and it's just super clear, like for everything, we're all like, this is not working the way it's working right now. Like the future looks a little bit scary. Like we have to figure out how to do that. Melanie, you spoke earlier already a little bit to how this could be done in an organization, like with a sort of bringing a group of people together. Like how would you go about setting something like that up?
So I think, there's a team, a cross-functional team that could be created to just talk about these issues, to identify the ones that could, in the immediate near term, affect your company, and that that group or that steering committee, if you will, would need to be something that is flexible and moldable over time, because obviously things change, and so any policies or ideas that you put in place now need to be reevaluated as the tools are changing and become more sophisticated. Some companies have gone as far as to say we won't create any AI generated images or AI generated video of our own employees and executives. And so that gives you the ability to then understand if something is different or is used, that it is either a fake or it is the authentic thing from your company. And so it gives you at least a sense that, like, I know as a company, we're not doing that. We're not going to use AI generated video of our executives. But it is up to every company to determine what makes sense for them, right? What's going to work and what has all of those perspectives included in it, and encouraging as individuals and humans to encourage our government to actually, pay attention to this. There's an open petition that people are signing that has like signees from all of the different leaders of these different AI model companies like OpenAI and others, and scientists and PhDs, basically a petition saying we need regulation and we need focus on this so that it doesn't become something out of control. And I signed it. I encourage people to sign it, and just to stand up for the fact that we want to make sure that we keep ourselves safe. But there's no clear solution yet. But what I would say is take some of the smart people that you work with every day that have different perspectives and try to come up with a solution that will work for your company.
And I think that's so true to think about, what's that, like really what's your situation like? I think one of the things that I just really just crossed my mind as well a lot the last days is just, if we're talking about if the channel is the place where you can kind of be sure, like just making sure that you build that trust right now and like communicate quickly and say how you're going to navigate the situation so that, I think if you get into a situation where something was created with AI, people didn't know about it and they found out after the fact, like rebuilding that trust, I think that ship will have sailed. I think it's something that you got to do early on and say, hey, we're aware of this, we're navigating this, this is how we're gonna tackle it. Because I think that's something that it's probably very hard to recover from.
That's right. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Mary. Welcome back.
Hello. Yes.
Right at the end of the sentence. Good timing.
Yeah, perfect. I was just going to say, is that all you had to share? I know we're getting at time here.
I mean, we'd love to answer all the questions in chat, but I don't think we're going to get to a lot of them. So we can always follow up with some of the specifics, since there's some very specific ones in there.
And I think our LinkedIn was also shared. So please connect with us and we'll be happy to answer anything that you shoot our way, or try to anyways.
Yes, feel free to connect with them. And thank you, Melanie and Tara, for that lovely presentation.